Business Matters Chat. We welcome again everybody's participation in this with questions following our speaker's remarks today. So Anna has the chat box open. Please feel free to submit questions in, and Anna will get to as many of them as time allows. If you think of something as we're going through the questions, don't be late to the party. Get it into her, and she'll get them asked. So today we're pleased to have with us David Maack, who is the Racine County Emergency Management Coordinator, a position that Dave's held since April of 1990. Wow, I think barely out of high school, just kidding. Carol, you can attest to that. David, prior to that, was a program and policy analyst for the Wisconsin Emergency Management and helped implement the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act program here in Wisconsin. Over the past 30 years, David has also built a program that has received national recognition from both FEMA and the International Association of Emergency Managers. He's a recipient of the 2011 FEMA Individual Community Preparedness Awards and the Engagement with Faith-Based Communities category, and was honored at the White House as a champion of change. David's written numerous articles on emergency management, including chapters on emergency management for the Wisconsin County Association's County Officials Handbook, and has spoken extensively on emergency management at state, regional, and national conferences. During his tenure, David has overseen 13 major disaster declarations. Right now, let's watch a 1-minute video, and when it's done, we'll welcome David Maack. Hannah? David,
Okay,
it's all yours.
simple as that. David's going to share his screen now as well.
All right. Did it work? All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Matt, thank you for inviting me. We took Matt out to Emmitsburg, Maryland with us several years ago, where over 70 of us from the community went out for a specialized disaster training program that was geared towards our community. And the partnership between Maack and Racine County is a vital one. And so we appreciate the opportunity to share. I'm going to try to make this as interesting as I can. The video that you just saw, those are all actual pictures from Racine County. And so as we go through, when you leave here today, hopefully you'll walk away with it's not a matter of if, but when something happens, and then answering the question, are you prepared? My background was shared. I think I have the coolest job in Racine County. I'm constantly doing something different. I get a very cool car to drive, as you can see, and I'm coming at you from our Emergency Operations Center in the bowels of the courthouse, several layers deep. And so we have all the latest equipment and technology there. A little bit about my office. We're a 2-person office. I have 5 volunteer deputy coordinators. And as Matt mentioned, we have been recognized for some of the work we've done. So it's been a very rich and rewarding career, which for me is going to be coming to an end later this year. I'll be retiring, but I'm looking at some options within emergency management. Who knows, maybe I'll jump ship and go to FEMA, or maybe work in the nonprofit sector. We'll see what happens. A little bit about what I do. I have the best job, I think, in Racine County, as I mentioned, because it's so varied. On any given day, I might be working on disaster plans. I could be offering training classes, public outreach, talking to groups like this. Pre-COVID, I would get out quite a bit into the community, talk to Rotary clubs and schools, and that's one of the more enjoyable aspects of the job, is going out, preaching the gospel of preparedness and having it resonate with people. We also do drills and exercises. That's another fun piece, especially when we roll real equipment and pretend that we're responding to some sort of disaster situation. And then there's the response end of it. And I wish disasters occurred between 8 and 5, but over the years it's been typical that call comes in at 1:30 in the morning, and I get up, jump in the car, and head out to the scene. So as you can see, there's a lot of different aspects to what we do, and it's so varied that it's been very interesting. There's never a dull moment. What do I do from a day-to-day basis? As I mentioned, developing them, updating those plans, coordinating that training, that public outreach, the disaster drills, and whatnot. What I want to do, though, is delve into disasters and how they impact us here at the local level. And when I say local, I'm talking about the county and the municipalities within Racine County. There's a mantra that I've been preaching for a long time, and that's all disasters are local. Wisconsin is a home rule state, which means that decisions are made at that lowest level of government. And so that mayor, that town chairman, that village president, when something happens, they are in charge. If at some point they need help, then they can ask the county for assistance, and the county can ask the state. So when I see on TV, there's a hurricane down south, and the mayor is saying, "Where's FEMA?" It kind of gets to me a little bit, because that responsibility falls on that mayor. And it's not FEMA's job to be that first responder. They're a secondary responder. In the same way, we're a secondary responder. We'll come alongside that municipality. There are some things that the state requires us to do. For example, even though that disaster may be impacting just one municipality, we do come in and we help prepare a damage report that we, the county, has to submit to the state. So there has to be a close working relationship. The other thing is, when you look at what is an emergency versus a disaster, what might be an emergency in the city of Racine because of the resources that the city has could be a disaster in the town of Dover because they have limited resources. So you can't put a neat definition around that. It's going to vary from municipality to municipality. And the same thing, it's going to vary from company to company. If you're looking at your own businesses that you work in, one business may be better able to handle something than another business. So the question I think you have to ask yourselves, and I would ask these both personally, as an individual living in the community, but also as somebody representing a workplace. If a major power outage occurred, would your phones work? Would your computers work? Could your employees work? We have become so dependent on technology that if the computer network goes down, many of us, come to a complete stop and are at a loss for what to do because we rely so much on information found on the network. Same thing with the phones. The days of landlines where it wasn't dependent on the electrical grid are over, and electricity and the phones and computers and everything like that are so closely tied. So looking at if something happened here, what would be the individual impact both to your home and to your business? What would happen if a fire destroyed your business? Would you lose your key documents, your computer files? Would you be able to recreate that? Do you have a list of things that you have in your that you own that if you had to present that list to the insurance company, you would be able to do that for reimbursement's sake? This is a picture of when Lakeshore Pharmacy caught on fire, and I remember my office was on the 7th floor of the courthouse looking down and watching the smoke and the flames billowing up, and they were able to recover from that. A lot of businesses are not able to, but they must have had a plan in place. They were adequately insured, and they were able to come back better and stronger. What would happen if a key vendor was affected? Would it shut you down? Could you fill your orders? This just-in-time inventorying that is seen today makes us more dependent on what happens downstream, upstream. And then what would happen if you lost a key employee? I bring that up because 16 years ago today, I walked out of the hospital after spending 38 days, 28 days in a coma. We had major projects planned, and at the time I was a one-person office, and there was no way to contact me. There was no way to pick my brain about what needed to be done. I was also, for 10 years and 11 Christmases, I worked at Brandt's Jewelers downtown on Saturdays and on some of the holidays there. And the business was dependent upon the owner. Everybody came in and wanted to talk to Paul for that discount. And Paul ended up in the hospital in the ICU. And it was left to me and a couple of the other employees there. And we had to make sure that that business ran, especially at Christmas time, because it was in the middle of our busy season. But that was a business highly dependent upon the owner, and that's not a healthy position to be in. So 1 out of every 4 businesses affected by natural disasters will never reopen. That's a scary statistic out there. Most of those are going to be your small and medium-sized businesses, but you can also see larger businesses that could be adversely affected by something like that. And then when you look at COVID's a whole different type of disaster, but how many businesses are not going to survive because of what we've just gone through the past year? So it's something to keep in mind. Most businesses do not have an emergency or recovery plan. That's something that we have tried over the years to work on. 47% of businesses that experience a fire or major theft go out of business within 2 years. 44% of companies that lose records in a disaster will never resume business. And 93% of companies that experience a significant data loss are out of business within 5 years. So it brings it back that having an emergency plan is vital and very important. And the question is, can it happen here? Absolutely. As Matt mentioned, I've overseen 13 major disaster declarations over the last 30 years. That's pretty significant in an area that is considered one of the safest places to live in the United States when it comes to natural disasters. So here's a list of different things that I've responded to over the years, and I want to point out a couple of them. There was a rare tornado, January 7, 2008. 2 tornadoes hit in Kenosha. My church, Per House Assembly of God, was hit. It took almost a year to get back into the building. The tornado lifted the building up, twisted it on the foundation. They had to go down to the studs. Some of the things to point out is they didn't have a business recovery plan. They didn't have a list of equipment that they own. They had to recreate a lot of that based on pictures. The Groundhog Day blizzard, we were dead in the water for 3 days and basically shut down the community. And then the Burlington flooding of 2017. I won't go through the statistics of that except to point out that there was $5 million in damages from that, but there was also the $4.6 million in economic loss. So there was $5 million in physical damage or equipment loss, but the economic loss from being shut down. Nestle Chocolate was without power for 4.5 days and so could not be operational. So I want to talk about COVID for a little bit. We're all tired of hearing about it, but it was a great learning experience as we went through this. Some of the challenges that we faced was the situation moved quicker than I think anybody anticipated. The mayor shut down the St. Patrick's Day parade. I remember that weekend going out to eat with my wife. She was getting a little leery, is it safe? And within a couple days, all of a sudden, we're in a complete lockdown. And I didn't see that one coming that quick. We had started when it looked like this virus was going to be spreading, started sitting down with key department heads and going over a pandemic flu plan we had, but we never anticipated that there would be a complete lockdown or shutdown like there was. There was very limited information about COVID. So as we were getting it, we pushed it out, but it was a learning curve for most of us. From the onset, there was a lack of PPE. People were buying it up. We were sending deputies out to Menards and places like that to get N95 respirators to make sure that police and fire had adequate equipment to respond. Back then, we still had very little guidance and direction regarding when to wear PPE, who should be wearing it. And so I think a lot of us erred on the side of caution. And then another challenge was integrating virtual technology into daily operations. So we learned a lot. Most of us didn't know what Teams was, had never been on a Zoom call before. And now look at Anna, she's adept at it and helped me pull this all together today. So really appreciate that. But it's been a learning curve for a lot of us. So what was our response as a county to COVID? We activated the Emergency Operations Center. I'll explain a little bit about what the Emergency Operations Center is in a minute. We redeployed personnel to support operations. I'm a 2-person office. At the time, I was a 1-person office. The Sheriff's Department was very good about assigning personnel to this situation, and we had manpower that we typically, in the last 30 years, I would not have had for those other disasters. We maintained situational awareness. We were just everything we could get, we were processing it and trying to push out what we thought was vital. We disseminated information, coordinated media briefings and releases through something called a Joint Information Center, or JIC. We developed plans for isolation facilities, alternate care facilities, and recovery. And then we acquired PPE, personal protective equipment, and coordinated distribution. And we assisted with testing and vaccination clinics. Real quick on what an EOC is, and then I'll should be able to open it up for questions. I like this definition. It's an unfamiliar place where uncomfortable officials gather to make unpopular decisions based on incomplete information, allocating inadequate resources for unanticipated requirements in too little time. In my 30 years with the county, we very rarely activated an emergency operations center except for a disaster drill. Now, for the first time in my career, we are activating this thing, and it wasn't for a couple hours, it was for several months. The longest activation of an emergency operations center in our local history, the state also, the longest activation. And then Friday is the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of activating that emergency operations center, where we relocated down there for the next 3 months. So if you look at, this is a picture of the EOC in operation. It provides a centralized location where we can provide interagency coordination. We try to get a group of people that could assist, and this could be elected officials, appointed officials, the various multidisciplines, to come together. Anyone that might have a role to play We have them come in so that we can be on the same page and help coordinate the response to it. We were not in charge of COVID. When I say we, emergency management or the sheriff's office, it is a public health emergency. We came alongside public health to assist them and in some ways, hopefully, to offer some guidance. And, while they were thinking about one thing, we were trying to anticipate needs, further out. So that was part of our role. If you look at the Emergency Operations Center, we provide a big picture view of the incident. We will set policy, we'll provide communications and messaging, we'll manage public information from there, provide and prioritize resources, and we authorize emergency expenditures. COVID was not cheap, especially when you had to start acquiring PPE, when you had to start setting up isolation facilities. There was a lot that went into this over the last year. So, are you prepared? What does your emergency plan look like? There's this saying that everyone has a plan until they get hit. And then when you do get hit, does your plan look like this? And I hope this works.
Our disaster recovery plan goes something like this. Someday we hope to have a budget.
So what we need to do is develop a culture of preparedness. I love this quote from Russell Honore. He was the general that came into Hurricane Katrina afterwards and kind of set things right. I'm not going to repeat that. We'll make the slides available to you. But really, is it government's responsibility to make sure that you have bottled water? Or is that a simple act that you can take upon yourself as a step in preparedness? And we're not just talking about bottled water, but it's having an emergency plan. So what can you do in the private sector? Number one is build a culture of preparedness within your organization, your facilities. Make sure you have an emergency response plan for the threats that may impact you: fire, flood, severe weather. If the tornado alarm went off right now, a weather radio, what would you do? Where would you go? Do you have a plan for that? And then it's also important to have a business recovery plan. And that's where, when I talked about Prayer House, they didn't have a recovery plan. They didn't have things at their fingertips that they needed to recover. Train your employees and test your plans and identify how you can help the community when a disaster strikes. Quick Trip, when something happens, they call us up and says to us, do you need anything? We have food, we have water, we have things that we can provide you. If you need gas, we'll give you priority. So Quick Trip has agreements in place prior to a disaster hitting a community, and they're willing to assist. And what do I need as the emergency management coordinator for Racine County? I need business and industry to embrace in preparedness. I need you at the table. We brought Maack out to Emmitsburg, Maryland, and that was one of the reasons we brought some company representatives out there. I need a business cheerleader, someone that is going to champion emergency preparedness and come alongside of us. And if we put on a program, encourage other businesses to participate in it. I need information, hazards, needs, resources prior to and then during a disaster situation. I need you to train and exercise with us. It's not uncommon for us to come into your business and say, hey, can we do a tabletop exercise? Years ago, Johnson Wax used to do these full-scale disaster chemical exercises. We need you to participate in a public-private partnership, a network with other businesses and government agencies, and develop relationships with key responders. And if something happens, we need you to call sooner than later. It doesn't hurt to call us in. We can always send personnel back. With that, I have a list of resources that are available out there. I have an emergency response plan template more for a smaller, medium-sized business, but covers, procedures for active shooter, fire, medical emergencies. The International Business and Home Safety or Institute for Business and Home Safety has a great open for business recovery plan template. It's very simple. We helped develop that, and it's free. And then there's some other resources there. I guess with that, I'd be willing to take questions.
Absolutely. I have a question, so I'm just going to jump in. So out of these resources you have up, so that top one might be really helpful. That's a template, you said. Then are some of these, is like the active shooter a little training, you said, or stop the bleed? Are there free opportunities for trainings that are out there that people could know about?
There are some online trainings. Until Help Arrives is an online training. I've taken it a couple times. I've taken Stop the Bleed training online. There are opportunities out there for some hands-on instruction. Once things settle down and people start inviting us back in, there are some trainings that we could do for you. We don't certify in first aid and things like that, but there's training I've done on Stop the Bleed where we'll go through the basics of it. Won't certify you per se, but I've had the train the trainer, and we have some other people that have had the train the trainer on that. So go through how to apply pressure, how to use a tourniquet, that sort of thing.
So they can contact
They
you
can
at your
contact
office
me.
and
Here's my
final thought.
thought. And then I'll
And
have my
if they,
contact information
right, if they
on there.
say, we're looking for something, you could be a resource for them, is what.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my final thought is emergency management, working through Emergency Operations Center, strives to bring unity, direction, and normalcy back to the community when chaotic events threaten us all. So I think that kind of sums it up. There is my contact information. The best way to contact me is via email. I tend not to answer the phone a lot anymore when 99% of the phone calls are spam. But actually, not quite true. And then we do have voicemail. So if you want to call me. Otherwise, email's a great alternative there.
Great. There are a couple questions coming in, but if you want to leave that for another second here, people can jot it down.
Yep.
And then you can stop sharing and we can kind of see each other a little bit larger.
And Anna, we can make the PowerPoint available
Sure.
if you want to send it. I don't know if it's easier for you to send it out to everyone, or if people want to get a hold of me and I can send it out.
One other time we did a follow-up. You sent it to me already, so I'll just send it to everyone who registered.
Okay.
Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's get to a couple questions here. We have, I'm just going to start from the top that I have here. So what can be done to assist small businesses to make sure they have an appropriate program in place? I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that question means.
If you're referring to like an emergency plan and stuff like that, we've done some workshops, and we could put, if Maack wanted to partner with us, we could do a 2-hour emergency preparedness workshop where we go through both that emergency response plan that talks about procedures, what to do for fires and severe weather and medical emergencies, and then dovetail that into going through the Open for Business recovery plan, which is a fill in the blank plan. If they want to get a hold of me, send me an email. I can send templates out, and I can answer questions and consult with them via email and phone if they want to get a head start on it. So there's a couple different options out there, but we're more than happy to put on a workshop. We've done that in the past. And then I've also worked directly with small and medium-sized businesses out there that we're starting from scratch. And so either way, I'm more than happy to work with whoever.
Great. Hope that answered the question from the person. So next, what lessons have been learned or benefits can we take away from this pandemic? Like how did our community come together? What could we do better next time?
There's a lot that we learned just from the emergency operations standpoint and command and control, resource allocation and things. Um, in the past, we've tested the EOC, in 2-hour slots. We'd have a little disaster exercise. After 2 hours, we'd say, okay, it's done. Everyone did a great job. Pat ourselves on the back. We found out that 2 hours isn't adequate enough time to test the equipment, whether or not things are working, whether or not the processes are working. And so from that standpoint, we identified a number of equipment needs within the Emergency Operations Center. Things as simple as plugs that we thought worked that didn't work, a lot of computer issues. We, in the old days, we had lots of whiteboards. Now we're finding that flat screens and using technology, we got rid of our, what do they use in the schools? Those white smart boards?
Yeah, yeah.
The smart board really became obsolete because we're able to hook the computer directly to a flat screen. I mean, those are simple things, but when it comes to being efficient down there and having all the tools we need, communication is a big one. And because of COVID, we weren't able to get all of the people we needed in the same room. And even though we can go virtually like this, it's not the same as having everyone around a table. So technology does not replace that face-to-face. And then I think that we did a pretty good job of leaning forward from a response end of it. We found out that some things weren't practical. We started going down a path and it was just going to be too costly. And you were never sure if the need was there. And so that's part of it, identifying whether or not there's an actual need for something before going down that route. And that was, we started working on plans for alternate care facilities if the hospitals got overloaded. As we embarked on that planning, and the school district was a big help there. I see Shannon Gordon is with us, and she offered facilities and said, whatever you guys need. And so we started looking at using some of the gymnasiums as alternate care facilities, and getting hospital beds in and things like that. But it proved to be very costly. And so we ended up not doing that. Then we started working with the state on could we utilize the facility in Milwaukee? And the Milwaukee facility at the time was run by the county of Milwaukee. And so it was a real fuzzy gray area. And it took a lot of time working through some of those issues. Hindsight says that while the idea of an alternate care facility is something that we should be anticipating, it was something that wasn't feasible for this community, if that makes sense. So then we started working on how could we collaborate with others. And then we started working too with Kenosha County on some things like isolation facilities. So there was a lot of good cooperation that started to come out of this.
Yeah, that's good. And that's what a lot of your preparedness work and your trainings prepare you for. So
Right.
you have to know the players to be able to pick up the phone. So so the EOC is still open today?
We have a virtual EOC.
Okay.
We go down there occasionally for meetings, but a lot of it is run virtually. We shut it down the first week in June it got to the point where we had done everything that we could to set things in motion. The thing with COVID is it's not like a tornado or flood where all of a sudden you have this immediate need and this flurry of activity. It was slow moving enough that we had time to actually prepare during, during that phase of when everything got shut down. And actually, I don't want to say we took our time because we didn't know how much time we had. We just, there were so many unknowns, but it moved a lot slower than like a technological or a natural disaster that comes in. So even when things started to heat up with the hospitals and public health and their caseload increased, we had done a lot of what we needed to do on the front end. And so when that was happening, it didn't impact us as much as it was the frontline personnel.
So if it's just virtual now, is there criteria that'll have it close like a finality? Like, nope, we're done now. Or
I
is it
think
just gonna kind of linger the way everything's lingering?
it will continue. One of the things that we've been working on is that DHS vaccination clinic. The ELC's taken kind of a lead in pulling that all together, identifying the site, obtaining it, which takes that off the plate of public health, who they're dealing with their own vaccination clinics, testing, the case follow-up. So I anticipate that once those vaccination clinics start winding down, I think that's going to be a good indicator that we'll also start winding down. There will be an end date to the COVID disaster and ELC activation.
And are you speaking, is that the one that's gonna be at the old Burlington Coat Factory?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So that was very interesting because it's a state-run site. They're contracting with a company to manage it, but we had to work with the state on the front end and identify a site, make sure it was operational, so that they could move in. And considering that we took an old storefront or an old store, there was work we had to do on our end before it was turnkey ready for them to come in and start pulling it together.
Right. Okay, couple more questions and we'll be right on time here. So, flipping to a little bit of cybersecurity, should your office be contacted if a company discovers they've been infected? Like when I'm gonna even just use an example. Did the city, what is this? The city had a big situation a year ago. Like, did they contact you? Or should companies be contacting you, organizations?
It would be nice if they did, because having situational awareness, and if it's something that we could help push out through our joint information center. It's because these tend to be isolated. It's not something that we would be opening up an emergency operations center for per se. If it was a community-wide attack, that would be a different story. Um, it is an emerging threat out there that more and more, when we have workshops and conferences, the topic is turning to cyber. We've had cyber exercises that we've participated in on a regional level. So it's on our radar screen. It's not an area that most of us in emergency management are very knowledgeable about. What's interesting about emergency managers is we're not specialists, we're generalists. We know a lot about, we know a little about a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and enough to make us dangerous. But it's also what makes us, we may not be an expert on cybersecurity, but we know who to call.
Right.
And that's where the benefit comes in.
Right. And then also the county is and the city are both developing little Wi-Fi hotspots around the community. Is that another level? Have you been involved with that? Any level of conversations there?
We have not, but it's something that from a response standpoint will be beneficial for us.
Right,
Having Wi-Fi connectivity and things like that, it makes us even more mobile.
right. All right, I think I have one more question that's a little more general, and then we should be good to go here. So besides doing what you're doing today to help businesses and individuals be more prepared, any other things you can think of for that our community locally still needs to do to be more prepared?
I think we've come a long way. When I took this job over in April of 1990, I would go and talk to a group and say, how many here think that we have tornadoes in Racine County? And very few hands would come up. And then when I would ask why, most people would say, well, Lake Michigan protects us. We've come a long way. I very rarely get that answer anymore, but it comes back to that culture of preparedness and getting that word out. If we can get the schools to talk about preparedness, there's a program available, I think, for fourth or fifth grade called the STEP program. And the state comes in, they have a little bag, and there's some curriculum. My wife was doing a after school reading program at Starbucks a few years back, and she was able to integrate the STEP program into what she was doing there because of the books that they were reading and trying to engage the kids. So that's a core piece. If businesses and industry and nonprofits can talk to their employees about being prepared, both at work and at home, because if you look at preparedness at home, if your employees are impacted by a disaster and they're not prepared, it takes them out of the mix to come to work. And when we went out to Emmitsburg the first time in 1998, I believe it was, we took 77 people out there. The scenario was a tornado that hit Racine County. Afterwards, they asked how many here would personally be affected, and 1/3 of the hands went up, which told us we had 1/3 of our workforce or our responders that would not be available if something happens. If something happens in the community, are your employees going to be able to come into work? If you're an industry or a business that provides a critical service in times of disaster, are you going to be able to provide that if your employees aren't prepared? And so really it's developing a culture of preparedness, having it woven through all facets of our community, from the workplace to the schools, using Neighborhood Watch and other groups out there.
Great tips, gives us a lot to think about, and I know all of us have learned something from the pandemic. Maybe we can use that to start beefing up our other plans. I think we all could do that. That's it for the questions, except, oh no, this is special. Where do I donate to help fund your run for the mayor of Racine?
Oh boy. That will be left for another day. I'm at work right now.
I had to slide it in. It really was a question that I got.
I can imagine looking at the group
You know who sent it. I love it. All right, that was it. Thank you so much, David. Matt.
Hey, thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for your support over the years. I've really enjoyed the partnership we've had with Maack. And when we came back from Emmitsburg, right away you wanted to do something, and I'm glad we finally were able to pull something together for the community that you work with. So thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. And if we can, I'm going to let you and Anna continue to talk as we move forward. But if we can put something out there for Maack members with a training, whether Zoom training or in person, let's look at doing it in 2021. I think we're all ready to get back in person, though, safely when we can. So David, thanks for being a part of this today. You're very gracious with your time. And again, I want to thank everybody else for joining us as well. Next month, April 21st, we'll be getting back together with our next Business Matters chat. And if you recall, back in January, we had Ascension Hospital, Kristen McMahon, and Dr. Litza on. In April, we are going to have Aurora. Lisa Just and Bob Miller from Aurora will be giving us a further update on COVID, the vaccines, and kind of where we stand. Just a little side plug. If you haven't seen it, we are getting back together in person tomorrow night at Milliger's out in one of their big, what's the name of the room?
Greenhouses.
Greenhouses, thank you. So we can socially distance and get together in person. And I'll tell you, if this is an indication people want to get back together, we've got almost 115 registrations. So that should tell you something. So if you're free, sign up and see you out there. But other than that, again, thank you, David, and we'll see everybody next month.
Matt, could I make one more plug?
Oh,
And that
sure, go
is,
ahead.
please get vaccinated. We've had I think over 60% of the seniors now have been vaccinated, something like 20% of our community. The more people that are vaccinated, the quicker we're going to get back into it. I got the shot. I had no major issues. My wife just got her first shot, and I think it's really important to talk about. And I know there's a lot of difference of opinion out there, but so many people have received it now that I really think that if there were major issues, you'd be seeing them pop up. And so please do it for our community, do it for your families. Let's get back to normal. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
David.
you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
David.
And if you have the opportunity to influence in the communities of color that are not getting vaccinated, to encourage them to get vaccinated, please do. We got to get that word out and encouragement out to have that get done. So with that, thank you again, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Take care.